Brutal sports were prevalent in many ancient empires, serving as a form of entertainment, a display of power, and a means of social cohesion. The Roman Empire was infamous for its gladiatorial games, where slaves and prisoners fought to the death. In ancient Aztec society, the ball game known as Tlachtli had religious significance and often ended in human sacrifice. The Mayans had a similar sport called Pac-a-Tac. These brutal spectacles showcase the harsh realities of life in these empires, reflecting their values and societal norms. While brutal, they offer insights into the complex tapestry of history and culture. Gladiator combat, one of the most famous sports in ancient Rome, was gladiator combat. It was a brutal spectacle where armed men, often slaves and criminals, faced off against each other and even wild animals like lions and bears. While it was incredibly dangerous, victorious gladiators could earn a lot of money. These games weren't just for fun. They served various purposes, including religious ceremonies and commemorating the dead. They were also a way for the wealthy to flaunt their power. But by the 4th century, as the Roman Empire faced external threats and the influence of Christianity grew, gladiator combat started to decline and eventually disappeared altogether. Venatio was a sport in ancient times that's similar to gladiator combat. It involved putting armed men against wild and often exotic animals. These matches were often quite one-sided. In a single day, just a few hunters could slaughter thousands of animals. Surprisingly, not only fierce creatures like lions, tigers, bears, and elephants were part of these events, but even non-aggressive animals like rabbits and deer were included. On the darker side, animals were also used to carry out punishments. Criminals, and most famously Christians, were sometimes executed by being mauled by large beasts like lions or bears. Polo today, we think of polo as an elegant sport for gentlemen, even to the point where a polo player on horseback is the symbol of a famous fashion brand. However, when it was first played by Persians around the 5th century, it was far from a refined game. Initially, it was a rugged sport played by skilled horseback warriors to sharpen their battle skills. Over time, the Iranian nobility adopted it, and ever since, polo has been associated with upper-class leisure, lacrosse. Before lacrosse became a popular sport in prep schools in the mid-Atlantic and northeast United States, Native Americans across North America played an ancient version of the game dating back over 2,500 years. In those times, lacrosse wasn't about fun. It was a crucial part of religious rituals simulating war. The purpose was to honor their gods and toughen up young warriors. These games could last for days and involve hundreds of players on each side. Unlike today's version with pads and helmets, the earliest players had no protection at all. Their sticks, rather than being made of metal or graphite, were ornately decorated and crafted from wood, possibly with deer skin. Chariot racing. If you're a fan of classic films, you've likely witnessed the famous chariot race in the 1959 epic Ben-Hur. While this sport still exists today, it reached the peak of its popularity during the ancient Greek and Roman eras, which is when the film is set. Chariot racing was a perilous endeavor for both the drivers and the horses, often resulting in injuries and even death. Nevertheless, it stood as one of the most beloved spectator sports of its time. Victory could lead to substantial rewards for those who were skilled and fortunate enough to win races. In fact, as reported in the historical magazine Plum's Quarterly, the highest paid athlete in history was an ancient Roman charioteer. Wrestling. Wrestling is one of the oldest combat sports, dating back as early as the 13th century BC, making it seem relatively mild compared to the other sports in this list. However, it had a unique twist. For much of its history, participants wrestled entirely in the nude. Those locks, falls, and pins must have been quite painful, without any clothing for protection. On a more serious note, Early wrestling didn't always resemble what we now know as Greco-Roman wrestling. There was a variant called pankration, a martial art combining boxing and wrestling techniques. Unlike traditional wrestling, pankration had fewer rules and could lead to serious injuries for the participants.